Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm Keith Peters. A new poll has found that only 33% of Republicans trust that the 2024 elections will be fair. Details from correspondent Bernie Bennett.
The poll found that most Americans do not trust the elections will be fair, but that the GOP voters are far less likely to think so. 58% of those polled overall say they trusted elections in the U.S. a great deal or a good amount. Yet while 90% of Democrats and 60% of independents trust elections, just a third of GOP voters did. 70% of voters overall trust that their state and local governments will handle the 2022 elections fairly, with 60% of GOP voters saying so. 53% of GOP voters also said they would trust the results of the 2022 election, even if their candidate lost. Bernie Bennett reporting.
The Supreme Court heard arguments today over what has become a controversial pro-life law in Texas that bans abortion after a fetal heartbeat can be detected. U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar says the Justice Department is challenging the law that uses a novel mechanism to try and shield itself from federal courts.
Texas is responsible for the constitutional violation here. It enacted a law that clearly violates this court's precedents. It designed that law to thwart judicial review by offering bounties to the general public to carry out the state's enforcement function.
But Texas Solicitor General Judge Stone says that the Department of Justice has no standing to challenge the Texas law that has virtually ended abortion in the nation's second largest state.
The United States cannot seriously assert that the Constitution requires pre-enforcement federal judicial review. It opposes that result in virtually every other case.
There's no word on when the Supreme Court will issue a ruling on the case. On Wall Street, the Dow up by 94 points, the Nasdaq rose 97, the S&P advanced 8, oil up 40 cents to $84.05 a barrel. More at townhall.com.
Thinking about deck carpet giving you the blues? Tired of your old dingy and broken tile? Let my friends at the Floor Store in Cleveland, Texas give your home the makeover it deserves. This is old Taco Joe coming to you for the Floor Store. Whether it's carpet, tile, wood flooring, or real wood laminate, the Floor Store can cover all of your flooring needs. Located at 405 West Henderson Street in Cleveland, Texas, owner Brent Harris can help. Shower tile, tub surrounds, even backsplashes. Give them a call today at 817-641-9444. The Floor Store, they got you covered.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
When you're hungry for tender brisket or some delicious homemade cobbler, then look no further than Leach Brothers Barbecue, located at 1106 East Henderson in Cleveland, Texas. Leach Brothers has been family-owned and operated since 1950. Take it from me, Taco Joe Orwinski. Todd and his family have been filling my belly breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a long time. Heck, I even have my own booth, open Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Come see them for dine-in, carry-out, and all your catering needs.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to No Judgment Here. I am your host, Tish Rss. Tonight, I have a special guest here with me. I have author Paula Peckham. It's so cool to introduce you as an author. How does it feel?
Thank you. It feels really good.
So, Paula has joined us this evening. We're going to be chatting a little bit about Paula's beginnings of becoming an author, how that happened, and the books that she has had published, those that are out available for us to purchase, and also one that is going to be published sometime soon.
In March.
And in March.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I, as always, I like to always get the background of my guest. For me, it's all about the details, the history, how you were as a child, where you were when you were in high school, how you landed your first major job that you spent many years there, 19 years, in, how you maneuvered out of that, and then how you got to where you are today. Because it is so cool to see people that start in, as everybody does, but for me personally, to watch people start in a certain, it's the journey, a portion of their life in a certain job, or maybe something that they didn't think they were called to do, and they are doing it, and then they maneuver out of that, and then they're in this new season. And I always like to say, what's next, even for myself at my age, in my 50s, and I think, wow, I'm where I am now, and I wonder now what's going to happen next. So thank you so much for coming on and for agreeing to hop on
Thank
and
you.
to share your journey with all of us. I am going to be watching the comments as we are interviewing. So if you have questions for Paula, or you want to do a little shout out to her, show her some love, as always, please feel free to hop in and hop on, and I will answer those, or have those questions read to Paula, and see if she can help us out a little bit with this thing called being an author and writing books and all that good stuff. So let's start. Paula, share a little bit about how you grew up, what kind of childhood you had, and family upbringing, and all of that good stuff.
Okay. Well, I grew up right here in Burleson. I went to school at Fraser Elementary, which is now STEAM. But I was the middle child. And so when my older brother started school, he would come home with books to read when he was learning to read. And he would sit on the couch closest to the lamp. And then my mother would sit next to him to help. Then I would sit next to her and kind of peer over to try to see the pictures. So he would read his book. And as soon as he was through, then it was my turn. So I would pick up the book and read it, repeat it back as well as I could remember it. But from as young as I can remember, like, I wanted to be able to read. And so finally it was my turn. In first grade, my first grade my first grade teacher was Mrs. Davis at Fraser, and she taught us how to read. And then in second grade, my teacher was Mrs. Rusk, and she gave us this contest to do. And we were supposed to read as many books as we could. And so we had this little notebook that we had stapled out of that paper with the lines that you practice handwriting on. And we would read to our parents, and they would sign off that you read it. And I was going to win that contest. I am 57, so I would have been 7. This is 50 years ago. I was going to win. I read so many books, like just every night. That's all we did. And Susan Zoden, if you're out there, Susan, she beat me. I remember her name. I was so disappointed that she read more books than me. But anyway, that same year, my mother started working at the Burleson Public Library. They opened it back on the old Clark Clarkson House, whichever one it was. But it's over there by all the new fish grill, that stuff, that house, that's where the library was. And so I just had this open conduit to books. And
My
so
goodness.
every day she would come home, bring me 2 or 3 more. I'd read them. She'd take them back. She'd bring back more. And basically my summers were spent laying on the floor in my bedroom reading books. And I feel like, Gosh, you get so much out of reading. I mean, you're automatically going to improve your vocabulary. You're going to be a more empathetic person because you've lived through these stories with other people. You expand your horizons, you visit things you've never seen. I can remember the first book I read that I did not understand the words, and it was 101 Dalmatians of all things. It doesn't feel like that's a big fancy book, but it's in London.
Right.
And so there were things that the writer wrote that is completely normal for people that are British that I didn't know what the words were. Like one of them was a bachelor flat. They lived in a bachelor flat. And I'm thinking something flat, like what does that mean? And they talked about a lift to bring up the food from the lower basement room in their little townhouse. And later, when I was reading Harriet the Spy, I realized, oh, that's a dumbwaiter. Like, again, you learn so many things when you read, and it's fun. And I am just flabbergasted when people tell me they don't like to read. And it's like, how is that possible that you don't like to read? So I don't know. It's just, I think once you read a zillion books in your life, it's just easier to write them because you kind of have just this innate understanding of what makes it good just because you've read so many, you know? So,
and so hearing that, and we're going to move into how you started your journey of writing books. When you think, after you've read so many books and you think, wow, okay, I know sort of the format. I know how, when I'm writing a book, how this book is supposed to look. As we were chatting earlier, it's not that easy.
no, it's one of those things where you just kind of jump in. It's like, oh, I can do that. Sure. You know, and then you realize once you get in it, oh, I don't know anything. I'm doing everything wrong. So, for example, the book that will be published in March next year, that was my first novel, just me all by myself. And it took me like 7 years to write it because I was mostly writing in the summer. It was trying to write while you're a teacher is next to impossible. I mean, you just don't have time. You come home and you still have work to do. And it just, I would try to write during the school year, but it just kind of faded off until summer again. But anyway, 7 years into this, when I finished my book, it was 145,000 words. And I didn't think anything about that. But then you start like reading about what books people will accept at their company. And it should be like 75 to 85,000 words. So basically I had to cut, you know, like a third, a little more than a third of the book. It's like, oops. So you realize as you start learning all this new stuff that I don't have the slightest idea what I'm doing. So,
and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So I want to kind of go back a little bit to when as you were growing up and you had this, it's like a kid who loves candy, a kid in a candy store. You have this library that your mom works at and just can read any and all. Did you have any sort of special or specific genre that you read or favorites?
Well, as a kid, like I loved all the horse books. So I can't remember the lady's name now, but she wrote lots and lots of stories about horses. But as a teenager, I started getting into Stephen King and loved everything he wrote for quite a long time until finally I just got to where, oh, this is too scary. I don't want to put this in my life anymore. But like Dick Francis writes mystery, and so many people don't know who he is. And I just love Dick Francis. Like he's in my top 5. Barbara Kingsolver, you know, just all over the place. I used to think I didn't like nonfiction, but every nonfiction book I've read, I've enjoyed. So, I mean, I enjoy that science fiction, Dune, you know, that whole series. There's a whole series of Dune movies out. You know, it's all good. It's all good. So just.
And that's a great writer in terms of, you know, I'm thinking about Stephen King, and for someone to be able to scare someone enough in their writing to want to close the book and think, no, I don't want to read anymore because I'm scared of either what's in the moment or what's to come. And you close the book, but then you love it so much, you're like, okay, gotta find out what's going
Yes.
on. And the suspense that he creates
Yes.
in his book is, that's a great writer.
I know. It
You
is.
know?
It is.
And we chatted about his books, some of his books becoming movies. And I always like to ask people that read a lot. My daughter is one that would read a lot, and there was a movie prior to The Mockingbird. I can't. Oh gosh, and she was reading a lot of
The Hunger Games.
Yes.
Yeah.
She loved reading the Hunger Games series. And then when she went to the movie, she was like, oh, she prefers the book over the movie.
Mhm.
And so, with regards to the Stephen King books, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think, so much of what he does is to build up. I called the book that we were talking about that I couldn't finish, but then I couldn't leave alone was The Shining. And I used the word dreadful, like it was full of dread. Like I can't read this. It's something horrible's about to happen. But then it's like, what's going on? I have to read it again. And so he does such a good job of setting up something that will terrify you, but he doesn't tell you exactly what it is. Like your own imagination fills all that in. And so that was another thing I had to learn writing, is that I don't have to tell you every single thing that you need to think. I can trust that you, as the reader, can either figure it out with subtext clues or, whatever else is going on, or imagine it. I don't have to tell you. I mean, this will be a very over the top example, but to say you would write like, I went to my car and I opened the door and I put the key in the ignition and I turned it. And then checking my rearview mirror, I put it in reverse and I back, like you drove to work. I mean, like you're going to fill all that in because that's what happens, So a lot of times beginning writers, myself included, just put way too much like stage direction in there. My book it's set in the 1800s. And so it's in Texas. It's like a Western. And I mean, I went over to a friend's house because I don't really have guns, but he does. He has lots of them. And so he let me shoot some. I needed to see what it felt like. And if it hurts your shoulder and, all that stuff. And I was like acting out, okay, which hand is holding what? And where is my hand? Where, and it's like, I don't have to tell you that. I can just say she held the rifle across her lap. And then you've seen a Western movie, you'll peel it in, I don't have to tell you where every finger is, it's like, and that takes out a lot of words from that 105,000 words, So you just, you have to trust your reader.
And so I think that is a really great segue into what you did for 19 years so passionately, because I believe that as a teacher, that explaining things is maybe what kind of went into that first, writing, because I want everybody to understand everything that's going on. And so teaching, but so how did you get into teaching?
Well, first of all, for everybody who feels like they're a failure because they don't graduate from college in the 4 years that you're given to graduate from college, it took me 17 years. Okay. I got married young, had babies young, and I was going like 2 classes and the night per semester. I mean, like two classes a semester. It took a long time. But the year that I graduated, like a week after my graduation, I'm exiting the highway to my house and there's this big billboard and it says, "Want to teach? Call 1-800-TEXAS-TEACHER." And I thought, I did want to teach. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to be an English teacher because I loved reading and writing. And so it's like, that will be fun. So I called the principal at Burleson High School. At the time, there was still only one. And the principal was Mr. Crummell, who had been my band director when I was in school. And I made first chair my freshman year and stayed it up until like the last semester of senior year. Like,
Wow.
so he knew, like,
Yes.
I'm good at my job. I'll work hard. I'll be a perfection. Like he knew he could trust me. Right.
Mhm.
So basically my job interview, I had taken off work to go to the doctor, was on my way home, stopped in at a Taco Bell and called him from the parking lot. Hey, Mr. Crummell, I was thinking about being a teacher. If I wanted to do that, would you have a job for me? And he said, well, it depends. What do you want to teach? I said, well, it would either be English or math, because I was good at math too. And he said, well, I can definitely give you a job if you're a math teacher. And it's like, okay. So basically that was my job interview. I went back to school to get certified, turned right around and went back to UTA to get certified. And they gave me an emergency certification. So I started teaching that fall, and I did it for 19 years and I taught math. So people say, you're a math teacher, but you write. And it's like, well, the writing was first, it was there, the reading, and it just stayed there the whole time. So yeah, you can do both. They're not exclusive.
That's right. And you were a teacher at Burleson High School for
19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
And so during that time, obviously you were passionate about teaching and obviously, because you were there for 19 years and then you maneuvered out of that season. How did that come about?
Well, it was just kind of a gradual thing. The fact of the matter is education in the United States is built on unpaid work by teachers. They work weekends, they work nights, they grade papers sitting, watching a movie. It's just like, there's no way to get it all done. There's just no way. And they just keep putting more on the plate, the state tests. And gosh, I'm so glad I was out of it by the time COVID hit. They were, okay, tomorrow you have to learn how to be a teacher on a Zoom call that no one knows how to use. It was just, and then the next year after that, it was hybrid. You have kids in your room.
Yes.
I was just so glad I wasn't there. But I loved being a teacher. I loved helping my kids understand math and, hearing those aha moments. And if a student would ever say, I used to hate math, but, hey, this isn't too bad, and it's just like, oh, good.
Yes.
I really feel like God put me on this earth to be a teacher. I loved it. But finally, it just got to the point. Like one night, my husband said, you are mad every day when you come home. And it was like blinders peeled away from my eyes. And it's like, you're right, I am. And that's not fair to those kids. They need one of these young new teachers coming in who hasn't figured out what's coming yet, to be nice and cheerful and, not be so cynical. And
right.
And so I just decided it was time to go.
Sure. It was your time.
Yeah.
It was time.
Yeah.
That season was over. And so then from that, gosh, obviously your love for reading. And how did you decide just one day to, I think I'm going to write a book?
Well, I had been writing it. So the first book, excuse me, the one that took 7 years to finish, and it was 145,000 words too long. So it had been coming, it had been in fits and starts, mostly during the summer because you just don't have time.
Right.
But when I left, I decided, all right, this is it. I'm going to figure this out. And so I got on Twitter and just started following like authors and people who were talking about writing. And, there's little hashtag writing community, hashtag whatever. And God, from there was just this little God chain of events that happened. And I ended up in San Antonio. This was like right when school started is when I started doing this. By September, 2 months, I'm in San Antonio at an ACFW conference, American Christian Fiction Writers. It's like you go to a class for an hour and then you switch and you go to another class for an hour, and you hear other authors or agents or publishers, they speak. And that's when I realized like I'm doing it all wrong, but you just learn, you learn and learn and learn. And so then I learned there is an ACFW group it says it's DFW. And it's like, man, I'm going to have to drive to freaking Dallas every month, but I'll do it. But it turns out they're in Arlington. It's
Oh,
like,
nice.
oh, that's not a problem. And so started going to that every month, met a lot of authors, got involved with that, got involved in a critique group. And they very gently, the first time, oh, that was nerve wracking. You show up with your pages, you pass them out to everyone, and then you read it out loud. And it's like, what if it's awful? What if they hate it? You know, and then they tell you everything that's wrong with it. And so you have to get a thick skin. But I just kept telling myself, they're teaching me and I'm learning. And so I don't care what you tell me. Tell me what I need to do differently, you know, so I can be better. And so, you know, that's invaluable. If you ever want to write a book, you've got to find a critique group that you can be a part of, because they will have already learned those things and they can point out what you're doing.
Wonderful.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah. So from there, I was able to finish the book, and then begins the long journey of deciding, do you want to self-publish the book, or you want to try to go traditional route and, you know, like put a book in Barnes and Noble store, you know? I mean, it's another thing you learn is that there are just a lot of gatekeepers between you putting all this on paper and having a book in your hand sometime down the road.
Do you see a benefit from all of these gatekeepers, or, I mean, how do you feel about that? I'm just thinking in terms of someone who is thinking about, and I so appreciate you sharing this, because people that are thinking about writing a book, you know, it gives them a little bit knowledge of possibly what route they want to go. But do you see a benefit in all of the gatekeepers, or?
Well, yes and no. Lots of people think they can write. And I mean, I guess anybody can write, but whether or not you can write well is the question. And so when you submit, it's like a cold call. You just, thankfully now we have email. You don't have to mail your box to somebody. It costs $10 to mail it and have them throw in the trash, you know, but you email something to an agent or somebody at a publishing house, and they'll know in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs whether this is good writing. And so the problem is they might get 10 or 15 of those a day or more even. I don't even know, but like it takes a long time to read and decide if you like this or not. And so if it's not great, like right off the bat, like even your first sentence, that might be, you know, where they stop. I mean, it's just like, oh, you know, it's just so hard. But if they don't think it's good, they don't really give you a big explanation about why. They just send you, if they send you a rejection letter, you may just never hear from them again.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
And it's usually just kind of a generic, oh, thank you, but this doesn't really fit what we're looking for. You know, if anybody ever gives you any critique, like even if it breaks your heart that they didn't, like at least they're telling you something, you know, and you just hardly even get that.
Right.
So the gatekeepers are there, I guess, to weed out the, oh yeah, I can write a book, you know, when like, well, first of all, learn how to spell, you know, I mean, like, because there's not somebody waiting to fix it for you at the other end. You know, you should turn in something that's really polished and good. But the other side of that is if you self-publish and there is nobody to do that for you, then you're going to self-publish a really bad book. Like you need all those people in between you writing it and it, you know, going live somewhere. But that's what your critique group can help with. And usually if you're in a writing club, like mine's a Christian writing club, but like there's Carrollton League of Writers. There's something called Dallas Area Writing Group. I mean, they're everywhere. You know, they're all there to help. And so a lot of times people will beta read your book or proofread your book or, you know, for a smaller fee than just like a professional, maybe they'll edit it for you. And but you always need someone to look at it beside you, because what sounds perfect in your head doesn't always come out that way. And, you know, someone has to say, what are you saying here? You know, to help you see that.
Absolutely. And so what do you think about self-publishing. I mean, what route did you go? Do you have a publisher? Do you have an agent? You had mentioned when we were chatting earlier that people need an agent, and why would they? Why?
Well, you can get by without one, but if you have one, the agents know the publishing houses.
Okay.
So like they can read your book and say, ooh, so-and-so over here will love this, but we're not going to bother them. They don't like this kind, So they know that if they're been around a while. They might have some good ideas for you about how to kind of publicize, or here's a good way to do a launch party. Here's a good idea one of my clients did before, blah, blah, blah. But they're going to take a cut of your money, and so they might get you a better contract. Like maybe the standard contract from your publisher offers, so much of a percentage being paid to you, and they might go back and talk them up to something higher. But you can do it without it. I mean, you can. And so what I've ended up doing, are we running out of time?
We are going to go to commercial break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to hear the rest of Paula's story. We also want to get into her books and where we can find them. You guys come back. We'll be back in just a little bit.
Wilfred Brimley for Loafing Dog.
I'm Wilfred Brimley for Loafing Dog. When I get the hankering for a hot dog, I go to Cleveland, Texas. Just a couple blocks off the square, they got Loafing Dog. They got the Neely Dog, the Mary Sunshine Dog, the Casey Dog, and the Shirley Dog. Why, they even got the Pacer Dog, the Brooklyn Dog, and the Jim Dog. Can't forget the Shane Dog, or the Joy Dog, and the Monty Dog. I like that fool. The Nakia Dog and the Braxton Dog round things off. Why, they even got a kids menu too.
Loafing Dog, 208 East Chambers Street, Cleveland, Texas. Lunch, catering, or takeout, plus outdoor seating. Phone number is 817-556-1040.
This is Wilfred Brimley. And don't forget, Loafing Dog won't give you diabetes.
Hey, there's something you forgot to do. It sure is hot. Are you sweating like a dog? Wait, what? Dogs don't sweat. Oh no, you forgot to get your window tinted. Whether it's the kitchen window that sits in the sun for the hottest part of the day, or you just got new wheels, call Sharp Window Tinting in Burleson. 817-615-9379, or look them up on the web, sharpwindowtint.com.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395.
The voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
Welcome back to the second half of the show here on Joco Community Radio. We are the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and live 365 days a year on the TuneIn Radio Network. To listen, simply go to tuneinjoco.com, where you can download the free app or listen live right there. We're also streaming simultaneously on Spreaker.com with select shows like this one streaming to Facebook. All of our shows can also be found on any one of your favorite podcast platforms, such as Spotify and iTunes. We are also on YouTube now. Check out our lineup on jococommunityradio.com. Thanks for tuning in. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Thank you, Next Level Claims, for supporting us here on Joco Community Radio. We are back with author Paula Peckham, and we want to go back into, as we were talking about publishers, self-publishing, having agents and things like that. And Paula, you were talking about how agents will take a percentage of how much your book or how often your book sells. Is that correct?
Well,
Or
okay,
correct me.
so if you go traditional, if that's the route you end up going, they will pay if it's a big company like Simon and Schuster or Penguin or in Christian world Zondervan is a big one.
Yes.
They will pay you in advance. If you're not famous, then your advance might be $4,000 or $5,000. I don't know. I've never had one, but I know that they don't start out big. Then your book has to sell enough copies over the next whatever for them to make that money back. And if they do make that money back, then now you start getting a small portion of each sale past that. These are now your royalties. And in a traditional publishing company, you're going to make like 8% a book or something. I mean, it's like tiny because you got this big gigantic advance.
Yes.
If you're Stephen King, you get a big gigantic advance. I don't know if anybody else does. But if you have an agent, then they're getting their cut out of that too. Now, the nice thing about the agent is that they don't get paid unless you do. So they are really working for you. I mean, they're going to do everything they can to make you successful, because if you're successful, then they get money from what you get.
Right.
So
right.
they're not there to rob you. They're going to help. But if you go to a smaller publishing house, like this is like what I have for my book coming out in March. The company is Elk Lake Publishing, and so they do not pay in advance. But I get a much bigger chunk of the percentage. So when I do get paid for books, like it's significantly more than what a traditional route would pay. And they give me an editor. So if they accept my manuscript, they sign me up with an editor. We work together for 2 or 3 months, and then that gets turned back into the editor-in-chief. They give me a designer, a graphic designer, to make the book cover, which was like the biggest thing I was worried about, because right off the bat, you can tell if a book has been, I mean, like if it's an amateur cover, it's like, oh dear. And I'm not skilled that way. I don't know how to do, photoshopping, and like I can't even picture the color scheme. I mean, none of it. I just that my brain doesn't work that way. So when I was thinking of doing all of this on my own, I was really, really scared of the book cover part. And you can pay somebody to do that, but if you have to pay them, $400 or $500, well, it's going to take you a long time to make $400.
Yes.
I mean, like here, this is my, how do you say, naivete? I have 1,800 Facebook friends, and it's like, I'll just post on Facebook that I've written a book, and I'll have 1,800 book sales in the first week. And that is not how it works. maybe 18, it's just a lot of work. You just got to get out and hustle for everything. Right. So, anyway, if you can get any publishing company, small or large, they can take care of a lot of that for you, and so that at least takes that off your plate. But if you just get tired of waiting, you get tired of the rejections, you get tired of nobody seeming to feel like your book fits any little niche they have, then you can self-publish. And anybody can self-publish. You just put it in a formatted form that works on Amazon, and you upload it. And then a couple of hours later, they say, okay, it's live. And then somebody goes online and says, hey, that looks good, I'll buy it. And then they print it and mail it to them. Like there's no big inventory anywhere. You don't have to buy 500 copies that are going to sit in your garage. It's just none of that happens. So it's nice that that's available.
That's true.
And gosh, during the pandemic, when everybody was locked at home, like book sales went through the roof. And so, and that was a good time for authors. You would have expected maybe everything has to shut down because everybody's home, but it was perfect,
Right.
But if you do the traditional route, the company will send a big old box of books to Barnes and Noble, and they put it on their shelf. And within 30 days, if it's not selling the way they feel like is good for them, they ship them all right back. And now you, the author, have to like buy back those books. And so it's just there's a lot
Wow.
of pressure,
Wow.
to be perfect.
Yes.
And if you self-publish, you're in charge of all of that. So there, take your pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so what type of books do you write?
Well, I decided when I finally got down to like, I'm gonna do this, that I would write Christian fiction. And part of that came from the little, at that time, the little Christian fiction that I had read for myself. I liked it because it kind of inspired me of, oh, what a great prayer that was, he said, or oh, she responded in such a great way when that tragedy happened. But on the other hand of that, it kind of made me feel bad about myself. It's like, well, that's not the way I react. I don't do that.
Right.
Like, it takes me forever to think maybe I should pray, I mean, like, and so I just wondered, a lot of times Christianity is really good at putting a mask on things
Yes.
so that to the outside world, like, oh, be a Christian, we're all perfect, and like, you just don't see that we're just as regular as everybody else in the world, and we make just as many mistakes, and we're mean, and we lie, I mean, like, it's no different.
Right.
And so I just thought, if I could write my stories so that my characters do mess up, they're real people, they have real struggles, they mess up. But I think the difference, at least for me as a Christian, is when my life is not going perfectly, I have hope. I have hope in God. I have hope in what the Bible teaches us about how things will work out. And
Right.
I remember reading somebody, I wish I could remember who I heard this quote from, because I've thought it so many times since then, but it said, everything will work out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end yet.
I love that.
So it's just like, just hang on.
Yes.
Just hang on.
Yes.
And so in my stories, the people are Christian, but it's not like in your face preachy. It's just like they think a prayer when they're, oh God, please keep him safe. Kind of, there's no like quoting of verses. Like, they might have a verse running through their mind, like, I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things, like you write
Right.
it so that they're worried or scared. But they don't, they're not perfect. And so finally in the story, they'll trust God, or they'll turn to God. And hopefully the message there, for whether it's a Christian or a non-Christian reading the book, is that God's always there waiting,
Right.
like that's the part for me that gives me hope. Like, I can mess up as many times as I do, and he doesn't leave me. So I just wanted my stories to show that people aren't perfect. And
Right.
God loves them anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that. And like we were chatting earlier, because we do know who God is, and God is love, and God is hope, and God is forgiveness and trust. And we as Christians are so broken, and so like everybody else, we're normal people, just regular people. I mean, and for me, I always look at or talk to someone who maybe is not a believer, or maybe doesn't have a relationship with the Lord, and I want them to have what I know, what I have. I want you to know the Lord. And so in marketing these books that are written with normal people, normal Christians, like you said, we lie, we screw up, we make mistakes, we're normal people like everybody else. How do you hope to market this book to those?
Well, I did a little bit of research when I knew I was getting close to being ready. Like, I'm either going to get a contract, or I'm going to self-publish. I'm almost there. So, like, what do I want to do? And I bought a book from a writer that's pretty popular in the Christian genre fiction world. And I always like to read Amazon reviews when I'm buying. I mean, I won't buy any book if I haven't read the reviews, because I don't have enough time in my life to waste it on a bad book. Like, I'm not
Absolutely.
you know, if it's not good, it's gone.
Yes.
So she's a bestseller. I mean, like, she's really, really, really well known. But there were people who left reviews that were like 1 stars, and they were so mad because it was Christian. It was a Christian. This book is nothing but proselytizing. This is, and it's like, okay, lesson number 1, don't even think you can trick them. Like,
Right.
Like, they're not going to notice that you're talking. Like, first of all, let's just be upfront that there's God in this book, and if they are intrigued enough about the story, maybe they'll read it anyway, even if they're not a Christian. And if they are, then they're going to see what they expect to see.
Sure.
But I think just trying to tell the story, just trying to, any way you can that you can share. And there's so much social media now. You can
absolutely
find a little way here and there to like slip it in. And I don't ever want to like eat anything, beat people over the head with it. But I just want people to know it's there and see if they are interested.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me about the 2 books that I see here that you've written, and maybe a little bit about them.
Okay, so how everything just always kind of happens at once. Both of these books are anthologies, which I did not even realize was a thing. I mean, I know you have an anthology when you're in college, like it's all the short stories that are supposed to be so famous and never make any sense.
Yes.
But people write Christmas anthologies. Like, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I never bought one,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, but now that I know they're there, and I'm like researching to see, well, how did they describe their book? And they're like everywhere. So evidently people like Christmas anthologies. So one author through ACFW had posted, to everybody like, hey, I want to do a Christmas anthology. Does anyone want to join me and, contribute books? And I thought, well, this will be a good way to say I'm published, so if I'm trying to get an agent, or if I'm knocking at the door to a publisher, I can say, well, I have published a book,
Yes.
So I thought, yeah, I'll do that. And then within 2 weeks, this critique group that I'm in on Sunday nights, they only had 3 stories. It's like 3 novellas, and their third person had just bowed out. Like, she was writing her thesis, she was trying to get her master's degree, and she just could not do it.
Sure.
So like, would you be interested to fill in for her spot? So the book I wrote it's like set in 1860. It's Texas, wagon trains, cowboys. Well, my part of this one it's called The Texas Heirloom Ornament, was going to be contemporary. It's like, wow, I don't know. I can do that. Sure. Well, as it turns out, it was the easiest one I've ever done, because my character was a teacher. Let me just open my diary. But one thing I realized is like, wow, you don't have to like stop and Google like every freaking thing you write down, because it's like, did they use that word back then? What would they call the driveway? It's not a car. Do they call it a driveway? Like, and you just get sucked into these holes of research to see if you can write what you're writing, but so the one with the 3 of us is 3 Texas women who is like a generational story. And so they're hooked together through this ornament that the first woman had in her story, and then she's like the grandmother of the character in the second story, and then she's the grandmother in the character of the last story. So it's like 30 to 40 years apart from each other. So they're connected through that family line. And it just has a faint little hint of like feminism in it. Like, the first story is in the 1920s, and women have just got the right to vote. And so she's like going to run for Congress. And then the next one is in 1970s, and women aren't managers, and women, they're the secretaries, but her boss wants her to apply for this job that's like a manager job. So the men in the office are trying to sabotage her because they wanted the job. And then mine is current time, but she's a coach, and there's kind of a good old boy network going with coaches. No, it's not bad, but enough that you know it's there. Okay,
Mhm,
so
mhm.
but each of those just had a little thread. So you learn that the women are strong and independent and confident,
Mhm.
and so if you like those kind of women, you'll enjoy the book,
I
because you're
love
like
it.
fighting for them.
Yes.
The other one, there ended up being 9 stories in it. It's a pretty big story. It's a pretty big book. There's 5 authors, and so everyone pitched in either 2 things, either a novella and a short story, or 2 novellas. And
Mhm.
except one person just did like a little introductory short story. But we titled that one Christmas Love Through the Ages, because it starts, like, mine is the first one. It's in 1860. So it's actually the characters from my book that comes out in March,
Oh my
only it's like 3
goodness.
years later. So I just picked right up where I left off and wrote them another story.
Oh, I love it.
But then it moves all the way up until contemporary
Uh-huh,
time, so
mhm.
there's just, we tried to space it out about every 20 years or so. And the writers, the authors are like from all over the place. So 2 of them are, I forget, I think they're like in Idaho or something, somewhere Yankee, somewhere where it gets cold. And then the rest of us are in Texas,
Uh-huh.
so you get a big variety of writing with that one. And they were all a lot of fun too. So
My goodness. So, where can we purchase the Texas heirloom ornament and or the Christmas love throughout the ages?
they're both available on Amazon. You can type in my name, will pull up both,
Mhm.
or the title will pull up both. And it's just a print on demand. When you self-publish,
Mm.
it just, you order it and they send it somewhere and it spits out a book. I don't know exactly how that works. But it comes in the mail like a week later. I mean, it's fantastic.
Wow, I
Yeah.
love it, and the covers are beautiful on these books, and I think I had posted a picture of both of the books in the promo of the show, but I will put in the comments the books and where you can purchase them. And the next book, what do you have the title for the book that's
Yeah.
coming out in March?
Yeah, so that one is called Protected, and so it's the main characters. And they're romance. It's all romance, but it'll be a series. So each
Oh,
character
okay.
in the story hopefully will get their own book. Some of them I've got them like right here. I'm ready, and some of them are like, I don't know what you're talking about yet. You haven't spoken. I haven't decided, but I've got at least 4 like ready to go. But they just require so much research. And
Mm.
like, one of them is gonna, did you know that Texas had an underground railroad for slaves? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
They helped them escape to Mexico. And so that's going to be part of the second book coming up. So I'm finished with Protected. It's in the works, but the second one is one of the characters from the first book. And yeah, so I want to get that right. I want to get all the details right. I want to get the feeling of it right. Like, I don't want it to come across as like white savior story. I
Mhm.
want it to be an authentic relationship story. But that's going to be one. And
Nice.
yeah, and then one of them will be a Texas Ranger. And of course, we in Texas think our Texas Rangers were just heroes, but really, if you read some of the books out there, one of them that I've been reading for my research is called A Cult of Glory.
Mm.
They were
Not a hero?
not so nice. so that one will have that little underpinning in
Mhm,
it.
mhm.
And in that one, there will be a girl who was kidnapped by Comanches.
Mhm.
And I read a lot of books written by people who had been, quote, rescued and brought back home, to kind of prepare myself for that. And they don't want to come home. They like being, yeah.
I love it.
Oh, it's amazing. It's such good stories. I mean, it's so much fun.
Where do you get your inspirations? Like, what inspires you?
Well, I think the first one, okay, so when I wrote Protected, I just took everything that had been my favorite about books that I liked. Like, so there's a little flavor of Phantom of the Opera.
Mm.
There is a little flavor of there's a John Wayne movie called The Cowboys,
Mhm.
where all the men have run off to California to search for gold, and there is nobody left to be a cowboy, but he needs to take his herd to Kansas or wherever. So he gets boys, little boys.
Mhm.
And so they're doing it, like they're doing it on their own. And so at the very, this isn't like giving a spoiler, the very beginning of the book, they're in a wagon train coming to San Antonio, and cholera has struck the wagon train, and a lot of them die, but all of the adults end up dying. So their children left to go.
Wow.
Like, where are we?
Yes.
We're in the middle of a prairie. I don't know what to do, you know. So so the main characters there are the oldest girl in the wagon train, and then the cowboy that's coming home kind of meets them on the plane and helps them, you know. So so the original thought of it was like, how, first of all, I want to write it as a love story that can be a true life, real person story, not a fakely nice Christian story, you know. And how can I throw in all the best parts of every book I've ever loved? So it was kind of hodgepodgey there for a while. It sorts itself out as you start writing. And then from them, the rest of them will, you know, of course they make it to San Antonio, and that's, you know, it will all take off from there. But
wow. I
so
loved it.
it could keep me busy for, you know, like the next 8 years. We'll see.
And I love the excitement
Yeah.
that you have as you're speaking about the next book, and this character is going to have this book. I mean, you can just see it in your eyes. And so what I love about that, and the reason why I share that, is because it's a passion that you can see. And when you see somebody that's passionate about something, then you know the books have got to be good, you know. And then when you take as much time as you have, we have a few minutes, to do the research, that to just speaks, no pun intended, volumes, in the work that you put into your books. And so I know that I am super excited to get my hands on these books. My husband is a Western watching fella, and reads those books as well. And I know that I'm sure that he'll be looking forward to reading your book, Protected. He actually had a comment here, and he said, "We need more teachers like you within our school systems. Enjoy your retirement, but always instill into our youth," which is what it sounds like even through your books. You know, just so much imagination, so much facts, but also a fiction book, real people, real Christians that struggle with the real problems of the world.
Yeah.
And I love that. I'm super excited to read your books, and especially the ones coming out in March now.
I know. I'm excited for it too. And, you know, it's like when I first, every time somebody would edit or help me, and I would be like, "Ah, really? I have to do that?" But then I would go fix it, and it's like, oh, that's so much better. Thank you. You know, and so I still do get to be a teacher in that way, because in the critique groups I'm in more than one, especially if it's a young person, but if it's a young writer, like they may not be young in years, but like first time,
Sure.
like to just explain, let me show you why this is wrong. Let me show you how you can make this better. Let me show you how this will be more seamless and more interesting, you know, and to be able to say to someone, this is why that's wrong, instead of like, well, that doesn't sound good. It's like, well, tell me what, I mean, like, you need to understand. You know?
Absolutely. So we can go and fix it,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, as opposed to that's terrible, you know.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness, I am so glad that you came on tonight. You have shared so much. And I know that with people that are even maybe just thinking of the idea of, I wonder if maybe I could write a book. You've shared so much knowledge in what that entails. And you've also shared so much about how amazing these books are going to be, and how we can't wait to get our hands on them, especially here they are around the Christmas season. It'd be such a great gift. And so again, the titles of the book, and I'll put these in the comments: Texas Heirloom Ornament And the other book is Christmas Love Thought.
Through the
I'm
Ages.
sorry, Christmas Love Through the Ages. And they're available on Amazon. You can order those and have them printed right out to you. And we are so blessed that we have someone who is writing the real good stuff. So thank you so much, Paula Peckham, for coming on. Absolutely. And you guys share this podcast with your friends and family, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us. Y'all have a good night.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.